I'm Lee Searle, translator from German and Portuguese into English, and I'm going to be reading an extract from Simon Elson's debut, Geschichte der Unordnung. The large living room in our house, which was surrounded by wild forest land, stretched steeply upwards, almost as pointed as a circus tent. The ceiling was made of a pale pine wood, whose grain and knotholes produced ever-renewing patterns when I stared at it for long enough. It was dusk now. I could barely see the ceiling. My father was carrying me on his arm. My head rested on his shoulder. I was crying. I'd been playing in the garden, where the crocuses, dandelions and daisies were already blossoming, when a storm gathered. Scared by the thunder, I fled inside. As my father was home, which wasn't often the case, he comforted me. First, he turned off all the lights. Electricity attracts lightning, he said. We stood in the half-dark living room as it boomed and flashed outside. I jumped to every bang and cried louder. My father wanted to move closer to the window with me. I struggled against him. But he went closer anyway, ever so slowly, to the thunderbolts and lightning flashes. He wore thick socks, his steps on the wooden floorboards almost soundless. I buried my face in his shoulder and he spoke to me soothingly. I felt his calm breathing, his body so completely relaxed, and I became calmer too. I clung to the brown, dense cotton of his pullover and finally dared peer out of the small living room window. Through the branches and young leaves of the tall trees around our house, I saw lightning flashes in the sky. They blazed in a dazzling blue-white I'd never seen before. Then this thunder, a rumbling that stayed in the distance, no longer coursing through my belly. I grasped that this wouldn't bring the world to an end. I barely heard what my father was saying, but his strength spread to me. He was proud and recounted at supper that night how bravely I had watched from the window. My little brother wasn't listening, and my two older sisters smirked. They already dared to venture out on the terrace during storms, to my mother's disapproval. She sat opposite Papa, at the other end of our large, oval wooden table, spreading slices of bread with butter and helping my brother eat. Contentedly, she pushed the little pieces of bread and honey into his mouth. She didn't like dares. At my swimming class, she struggled to hand me over to the robust instructor, who sometimes, if necessary, shoved me off the 1-meter board and pushed me underwater during diving so I'd get the seahorse badge. Other mothers watched their children through a glass partition that separated the cafeteria from the pool. My mother rarely did that. I was kind of a crybaby, and she was sensitive, often a bit wimpy. I learnt this word from her early on. When she spoke on the phone, sitting on the sofa with the brown wool cover, I sometimes went to her and she would caress me. Rhythmically, like a weaver at her loom, she stroked my hair behind my ear, looked at me with her green cat-like eyes, which contrasted with her dark hair. My 3 siblings also knew she liked doing that while she was on the phone. Our garden, a seemingly giant forest, was the best playground. The house, built into a slope, had 3 floors in the lower part and just 2 above. It was new, built according to the anthroposophical principles of our parents, with lots of pale wood and nooks and crannies. Cosy, muddled. I didn't wonder why the windows had to be partly wonky, as I would have described it as a child, or why there wasn't one single square-shaped room. It was home, my circus tent, cave and castle. All around, on a plot of land larger than a football field, stood at least 30 tall trees, mostly oak. The narrow path around the house could be ridden along with a tricycle or bike, which my mother soon forbade us from doing, because we often strayed off the path and destroyed her plants. Only ground elder is a weed, because it's so rampant, she explained. I didn't go to kindergarten, because I had my younger brother to play with, and Mama. She was always home and taught me everything, that the body of water at the bottom of our wooded plot wasn't a river, but a stream, a small one, but that it was still possible to drown in it, especially in spring, when it rained a lot. She explained to me that although rubber boots stay watertight at the bottom, they fill from the top if the water's too deep. And then what? empty them out, put them back on, carry on playing. It didn't bother her that we never came in from the garden clean, and rarely with dry feet. We could drink the water from the stream, but not from the puddles on the street, she warned us. After all, she knew I'd once scraped some grey-pink chewing gum from the concrete and put it in my mouth, something my father had merely laughed at. Dirt was good, he said, because it strengthened a child's immunity.